and I just never knew this before. But what makes it especially interesting to be talking about these topics here with you at AVT in Copenhagen is I just looked on the IMD country index. Have you seen this? Denmark, you were #1 in terms of competitiveness of countries in the world. So this is the country in the world that people want to be. It's an index that's based on all kinds of different dimensions. And there's a sub-index, which is the Digital Competitiveness Index, and you are #3 on that one in the world. So this is a country where amazing things happen. You might be small in size and in numbers of people, but you really punch heavily above your weight in this space and in all things technical. So I think that makes it really interesting to talk about this topic in this country. So what I wanted to do is share with you initially my art. So this is a piece of art. Knowing I was coming to Copenhagen, I wanted to do something very special for you. So I worked very hard on crafting a beautiful picture of Danish executives in a palace, which is a classroom, having a lecture. And the art on the wall is in the style of Van Gogh, because I like to dabble in art. Now, of course, this took me all of about 60 seconds, because, of course, I put it into ChatGPT and told it to render me a picture, and it did. And so this is the topic we're talking about today. Some of you should be shaking your boots, right? Is my job about to go away? If your job was making, clip art for professors, I'm afraid that job is, getting much smaller right now. If your job is actually is doing final drafts for college students on their essays, that is another job that's kind of basically just gone away. So this is a very interesting technology, and it's kind of very top of mind. So the topic we had for today was digital strategy in OpenAI. I've given a sort of a subset of this now. We're going to engage with this technology and understand more about it. We're actually going to try and innovate, and I'm going to show you why in particular I think this is really good for innovation. And I think we might all experience a slight existential crisis as we go deeper into this topic. So that is our goal for this morning, to get you right through from innovation to a crisis. How about that? And so this is the subset of companies we're talking about today. So we're starting with our kind of OpenAI superstar, which is ChatGPT. ChatGPT comes out in November of 2022, and by December of 2022, it has nearly 100 million users. So this is kind of a phenomenal success in terms of the launch of an app in the world. But this is not the only example of this kind of technology that we'll talk about today, this sort of chatbot technology that is available for us to use almost for free or for free. We have some copycats. We have Microsoft that launched its own version, Bing. Microsoft, of course, invests in ChatGPT, has put $10 billion into ChatGPT. Bing has recently been rebranded as Copilot, with Bing sort of being a subset of that now. We have also launched in March of 2023 was Claude, the Anthropic version of this. And Anthropic's the company that Amazon has now put $4 billion into. So more money flying into this industry. We have Google, whose original launch was actually Bard, B-A-R-D, our Shakespearean Bard. Bard had some problems. We'll talk about those soon. But Bard has been taken away, and some replacement technology has been launched. That's Gemini, which is actually based on a slightly different model, but that is Google's current entry. And then we also have launched in August of 23. We have Baidu's launched Ernie, so a chatbot coming in from China. So these are all examples of the openly available technologies that we can subscribe to or use for free. And of course, there's some other specialized versions of this kind of generative AI technology we can use for images, you can use for sound, you can use for video. And that's the class of things that we're talking about here today. So that's our topic. We're going to explore it a little bit. Why is it interesting? This is where all the money is going in the stock market today. It is what is driving all of these returns. It is what all the big salaries are going towards right now in terms of people and jobs in the market. So there's something very interesting going on, and we want to understand more about it. Was there a question? No. Okay. Okay. Now, what's interesting though is that this was already a topic in October of 2022, which is the month before OpenAI launched ChatGPT 3.5. If we were to survey you back in October 2022 and ask you what you see as most strategic for your industry, you already thought machine learning and AI was actually something that was really critical to you. So, what I want to cover here is a few different topics to really get at this. And so the first one is what's new? Like, why is this suddenly a buzzword, something that we're really focusing on, that everyone's spending money on, spending time on? What's going on here? Secondly, let's dive a little bit into what it can do. Let's start trying to explore that. Let's understand what maybe some of the limitations might be of this technology. So what's the catch, with what's going on here? Let's also just give you a little bit more info on how to use, and there may be some expert users in the room, who knows. And then lastly, we're going to test it out and see if, and we do a little exercise here today, if we can use the power of this technology to better innovate and see if we can learn on this technology. So that's our agenda. What I wanted to just check on first, because I am with the #1 country in terms of competitiveness and #3 in terms of digital, who here has used a ChatGPT or one of these technologies? Okay, who would describe themselves as an expert user of these technologies? Okay, so a couple using it. Let me do a subset of that. Who's using it, I'll say, extensively at work? Okay, so that's a smaller subset. Okay, that sounds about right. So this is something that and I do really think, because we first started talking about this in this class nearly a year ago. And nearly a year ago, you were definitely ahead of folks in the US in terms of the use and experience of this. I remember a year ago with my digital strategy class, there were some folks who were, when we talked about ChatGPT, there were sort of comments where, I like it, but sometimes I get really mad at it because it doesn't do what I want it to do, and it makes me feel a bit sad. It's like, wow, people were using it to do things like write wedding speeches, playing with it on the edges. But what we've seen over the last year is people have become more engaged with it in terms of using it for kind of real productive purposes. And we're going to look at some of those today. So there's been an evolution. Okay, so let me start with this first topic, just to lay out this groundwork of what's new about this technology. Why should we care? So one thing that's new, as I mentioned, is the way this caught fire in the world. And this has really struck all commentators as they think about new technologies emerging. These are a set of technologies or apps, and these are the months it took to get to 100 million global monthly active users with each of these technologies. And so you see actually one of our first versions of a generative, pre-trained AI technology, like the technology driving ChatGPT, which is Google Translate. That actually took 78 months to go from launch to 100 million users. We see Uber, this massively successful ride-sharing company, that took 70 months. And we go down the list, Instagram, pretty good. TikTok created a massive stir when in 9 months it got this kind of share. And then here we see ChatGPT, in just 2 months, it gets to 100 million users. So there's something interesting about this. What made it grow so quickly? So let's try and understand that. Now, just to understand why it is something different from the AI that people were worried about in October of 2022. It is a different kind of model than the model that's driving machine learning artificial intelligence, which is the AI that we were looking at pre-November 2022 as being the one that we thought was going to really take over the corporate world. So what does that mean? It's a large language model. It means it's a model that basically its only real job is to, given a sequence of words or tokens of some other kind, but words is the predominant model that's used here, to predict what comes next. So it can fill in what comes next if you give it a sequence of words. So the color of the sky is, it believes, based on putting it through a model, which is pre-trained, based on a series of parameters, that 91% likely the next word's going to be blue. And that is all this technology is doing, as it answers every question you have about life, the universe, and everything. Kind of crazy. That is what's driving this. So it's a large language model. And how is that different from what we've known before? So In traditional computing, before we talk about AI, we basically, the way computers used to work was we'd have data, we'd have programs, we put those two things together into the computer. There'd be computing would go on. Some of you may remember this. Some of you are closer in age to me than my kids. Then you would end up with outcomes, and that was what traditional computing was. Okay, that's how that worked. Then we have machine learning comes along and has been with us for a number of decades now, but it's a little bit different, because what it does is it says we've got data and we've got outcomes. And if we put those two things together, we can do some computing with that and then come up with some programs we can apply to other data and make predictions and therefore come up with answers. So artificial intelligence is what then emerges, and we find this is a very useful tool for doing all kinds of things, so we don't have to get the human involved as much, which is great for productivity. So that's traditional machine learning. So data has outcomes. You do some computing to work out what's driving those outcomes, and you can make a prediction. How does it work? It works because you have this data, which is some kind of set of items, some kind of structured data, which has labels on it, which the computer can look at, process, right, on its chips, to understand, with all this data, what labels match to what. And based on that, it can then make predictions, so that later with machine learning, when you have an apple and you want to make a prediction, this picture, the computer is now 99.8% certain that this is going to be an apple. The challenges with machine learning is that you've trained it on a set of structured data. So the structured data was all these particular things that related to particular outcomes. So the picture above is an apple. If this is what an apple is, and you see this, the computer doesn't quite know what to do with it, right? Because it's basically just working the parameters that it learned, because it looked at pictures, matched them, created a rule, and therefore said what an apple was. It's not going to be as likely to say this is an apple. There's only one way machine learning is going to know that that's also an apple with the same level of certainty. How would machine learning know that that was also an apple? If you teach it, right? So within that structured data, you'd also have this, and you'd label it an apple. Then it would know. So you have to have structured data that's labeled, and then machine learning works. And so that's what we had before, and that's great. That was working very well. But then around 2016, there's a lot of work going on at Google and at OpenAI, trying to understand there's something with all these new technologies we've got going on, this stuff that's going on in Google Home, things that about images, about putting different things together in different ways. We're predicting in new ways. And in fact, what we're doing is we're doing something a little bit different. We're doing this. We've got a model where we have a lot of data. So an awful lot of data, but it's not that structured data that we're used to having. And that until 2022, all companies that wanted to make use of AI were really worried about. So until 2022, if you wanted to make use of this artificial intelligence, you needed to have very good structured data. And unfortunately, a lot of companies, particularly traditional companies, have very bad structured data, right? It's there, but it's in all these different databases and all these different forms, and it doesn't really talk to each other. So it makes it very hard to take advantage of this. Instead, what they had was unstructured data of some kind. And so with a large language model, or GPT, which is a generative pre-trained transformer, it's a transformer model, what you have is you get a very large volume of data, and you don't have to have a structure on it. In fact, it's unstructured data. And what happens is that computing program uses neural networks to basically work out what the parameters are, so that it can make predictions about what things are. And so the programs that are emerged that can then predict outcomes can use this unstructured data to make those predictions. So that's a real advantage. That's something really new and really different. And why is that an advantage? It's an advantage because using machine learning, which is what we were using before, to recognize things and then act on them, which is what machine learning is doing, right? You have structured data and you act on it. There can be real problems if that's all you have, because you have limitations if the structure of your data doesn't match what's being expected, if that apple doesn't look like an apple. And this is an example of one of the horrific cases of when this didn't match. So this is what happened when Uber actually pulled its autonomous driving experiments, because it hit a pedestrian, and it hit a pedestrian in one of its markets when it was testing its autonomous vehicles, which were driven by AI, by machine learning. And why did it hit the pedestrian? Because its machine learning knew how to spot a pedestrian. It knew if you see a pedestrian, what to do, to stop, to swerve, to not hit the pedestrian. It also knew if you see someone on a bicycle, not to hit the bicycle, to swerve, to avoid hitting the bicycle at all costs. What it didn't know was what to do with the pedestrian who's walking with the bicycle. And that was the person who was hurt, who was killed. So there's something very dangerous, right, about this. And so this machine learning technology, this GPT, which doesn't rely on structured data, but instead can infer much more broadly, right, and much more what we seem to be intelligently from large volumes of data, hopefully allows us to avoid some of these problems and then creates a much more powerful model of prediction. And so that is the underlying technology that's there with ChatGPT, with this generative pre-trained transformer model, which does this. And do I have another picture? Yeah. The other picture I'll show you is so that's what happened. Now, the other question to really think about is why now? Why in 2022, 23, 24? Why is it now that this kind of technology is really taking off? Why did it take this long? Because it seems like a pretty good idea, right? That we should have been doing this all along. Yeah. So there's a number of things going on at the same time, right? So one is computer power. And why do we have the computer power? Because Moore's Law is there, but also because we also really supported this gaming industry, right? We bought our kids Xboxes and PlayStations, and that paid for NVIDIA, and that meant that they could develop their chips. So absolutely, the computing power is there. What else is there? What else caused this tipping point to allow this to emerge?
Access to it online, the speed of the internet is growing.
So the bandwidth of the internet, the online access to data. Yeah. So literally, this is the number of words processed by these large language models in order to be able to make these great predictions. And so if you see this, you can see that the first launch, these are the first sort of tests that weren't publicly launched. 3.5 is somewhere around here. It's GPT-4, which is in hundreds of billions of words are actually being put into it because they're all online. So it's almost everything that we've written in humanity is online, and that's what's being used to drive this thing. Like, that's incredible. It's not quite everything that's there because that is 10 trillion is the number of words that humans have made. What's interesting is you look at these is this is the number of words that the average human actually reads or hears in their lifetime, right? Because we're all, we're doing more little texting and messaging, and we're not reading in the same way. So that's what's going on here. So that's what's so incredible. That's partly why this is happening. What's also somewhat comforting, though, is that the number of parameters that ChatGPT has is much, much lower than what humans have. It's getting higher, but it's still much lower than humans. So it may have more words than we do inside, which are driving its predictions, but our brains actually have more parameters than it does. So we're still kind of beating it at that level. But that's how close this is getting. Right? It's kind of interesting as how this technology is emerging. So yes, so it's why now. It's because all the words are there. They're online. The processing power is there, and the data storage is there. And so we have this emergence of this technology. That's something that's very interesting for us. Okay, so it's there, it's happening, and so we therefore need to understand kind of what can it do. So what are the capabilities of this technology that we could use? I think we had 2 or 3 folks that said they're using it quite a lot at work. Most are using it, playing with it more, perhaps socially, perhaps for personal reasons. I want to explore with you a few use cases which I think are interesting. I have others if you want to, if you have questions, we want to go deeper. And then I also want to share with you 2 academic studies which I think show you the power of this tool and the emergence of it. And I preface this with, as I follow this industry and talk to colleagues and executives around the world about what's going on, what strikes me is there are kind of 2 camps here. there are the business people, right? The executives, the leaders in their firms who are taking this technology and trying to work out what they can do with it to make the most of it. And then on the other side, there are the academics. And in some ways, they're actually the leaders of these tech giants who are kind of developing these tools. And what's interesting is the business executives are there going, okay, so, what are we supposed to do with this? Where's the manual? How can I work out, how to most optimize what I need to do with this? Okay, that's normal, right? That's what you'd normally expect. But what's interesting is when you go to the academics who are speaking to all of these heads of business, and you go to these heads of business, what you find is they don't have the answers. They really don't know where this thing is going. They don't know all of its capabilities. They don't know what you can do with it. So it's constantly evolving, and in fact, the tool, gets better, every day. So the more we use it, the more we apply it, get it to do things, train it on different activities, give it more data, the more it's learning, the more it's evolving. So what it can do, there is no kind of fixed answer. That's kind of the first point. But it's worth exploring some of the things that it might do and to see if perhaps this is something that you could be taking advantage of. So what can it do? So when it, in April, when GPT-4 goes live with an extra price on it, OpenAI announces at this launch in April that it can beat 90% of humans on the SAT exam. The SAT exam is the college entrance exam in the US. It's not easy, right? It's not an easy exam to do. So that's kind of interesting. It can do that, right? It can match our educated, 18-year-olds on what they need to know to get into college. It also gets top marks in law and medical exams. So it's as good as our emerging lawyers and our emerging doctors. So it can master the knowledge and comprehension of those people. That's something that it can do. That's a little interesting and a little frightening. Because of that, some predict that what it can do is it can actually take jobs, right? It can take over the jobs of people. And one of the larger predictions from Goldman Sachs was that there'd be 300 million jobs that would be basically could be lost because of this technology. So that is kind of interesting, a little scary. A recent report that came out basically said that most of these jobs are going to be lost in places like banking and tech. Now, this is very interesting because this is not where we normally lose the jobs. So normally we have new technology that comes in. It's normally the blue-collar jobs, right, that get in more trouble because it actually does the repetitive tasks that we can replace those with kind of robots with assembly lines. So those jobs are kind of in trouble. But what this says is it's those jobs that we've been telling our kids to get into because they're safer, right, because they're knowledge workers. Those are the jobs that actually this new kind of technology can do because of the way it looks at ideas, the way it looks at data and makes predictions. It actually gets to kind of do some of these jobs. So that is a little interesting and that is a little scary. So there's another piece here. And so, here we go. So what does that mean? It means that, ChatGPT can start to replace some parts of our organization, some parts of the functions we have. And so, for instance, ChatGPT can be your new marketing team. And so what is this? This is me spending about 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I went in and said, okay, so tell me the name of a really cool bakery in Copenhagen that college students would like to go eat at. It would be really trendy. Then I would like you to make an ad for me for those college students so that they will go eat there and have a slogan and put it together and make me an ad that I could put on social media. So it took me less than 5 minutes. It told me that Juno the bakery is a bakery, which is correct. Is that correct? Yes. And I then did look up to make sure it was a bakery. It told me when it searched it that it was very much known for its cardamom buns. It told me that, right? So I'm like, okay, that's interesting. I didn't ask for that. It gave me that information. And then it said that this would be, an example of an ad that you could use. And so, yes.
That doesn't spell the name of the bakery.
It's a kind of annoying, this thing, isn't it? It does that a lot. So yes, so this is what it did. But mind you, in the prompt, it's clearly spelled correctly, right? So So, and those of you who play with this will see this frustrating thing. So then what do? You have to talk to it again, right? So, so I talked to it again and I said, no, this was great, because it actually likes to be praised. It's a little weird. When they do tests on how it performs best, it doesn't like to be treated like a hard-working employee that you don't like very much, who's not doing a good job. It likes to be told it's doing a good job. It likes to be encouraged. It's a little odd. So I told it, this is great, fantastic, but could you try again? Could you make the design, I think my prompt was something like, more, a little less busy, a little more modern. I said, could you please spell the name of the bakery exactly as put, and I actually must admit, because I hadn't yet looked online to see that it actually is called Juno the Bakery, right, as opposed to just Juno. So I said Juno. I didn't mention the bakery bit. And then again, not having been to the bakery or looked anywhere else other than ChatGPT, I said, could you please put the slogan in Danish, right? Because I'm a Danish marketing firm. I'm not Australian anymore. And so it came up with this. So is this correct? No. What does this say? Nothing?
Every bite is a fresh start, but there's a teach too much in every.
There you go. So it's not perfect, but it's close, right? It's close and it's interesting. And you can imagine, even if this is wrong, right? You're Juno the Bakery. Haven't you just got like 3 or 4 new ideas about what you could do and how you could change things and what could happen? And so this is what we're seeing. Someone who I'm going to refer to his work in a minute, because he's a professor at Wharton, Ethan Mullock. And Ethan Mullock is the person who I think is most on top of this in academia. So if it's a topic you're interested in, he has a Substack, which he publishes in regularly about what the latest things are. I highly recommend you follow him, Ethan Mullock. I'll give you his name in a minute. It'll come up. But he said that they did fire their marketing arm of the part of Wharton. He runs a part of Wharton that is an institute that is about open access to education, and they don't use a marketing group anymore. They use these technologies to do it. So those are these white collar jobs that could be going away, right? So that's a little scary, right? That's what this technology can do, and it's very, very powerful. Yes.
Don't you think it's also a way of, you would say, if you do this marketing,
Yes.
you can always argue if it's better or worse or whatever.
Yes.
But the price of it is so low that if it doesn't work, you just make something new tomorrow.
Yes.
And that means, so you kind of accept that if it was a human who had made it for you, you would have quality standards and
Yep.
da 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 da.
Yep.
Whereas here, it's like, okay, I spent 5 minutes or 10 minutes on ChatGPT,
Yep.
I got something. Yeah, it looked fine.
Yep.
I'm impressed with what I get
Yep.
at that cost, so I run with it. And if it doesn't work, I make something new.
And let's go a little step deeper even. You can also make it smarter, right, than I did. So I spent 5 minutes with a short prompt.
Yeah.
I could have said, I could have actually asked it. I could have, and I'll give you an example of ways you can ask things in a clever way. But I could have said, I'd like you to do some market research for me. I'd like you to identify the top segments of people going to bakeries in Europe, in Denmark, in Copenhagen. What would you call those segments? And then I could make it be a persona of each of these segments.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I could have said, I'd like to have a focus group of those people. If those people in a room and I asked these questions, could you summarize what they would come out with if I gave them half an hour to talk about things they like best about bakeries, things they don't, concerns they have with going out in the city, blah, blah. I could have had all these questions that would have come up with things. Based on that, could you design X slogans, which I can then look at? Could you then test these slogans against the persona that I just made you be to see what your likelihood of buying would be? And I could even have a little bit more confidence than just, let's just try it, right? And then I could say, those 5 personas you identified for me, could you please tweak this ad for each of them, before I said, so there's all these things I could do to make it smarter. And all of that, instead of taking me 5 minutes, would maybe take me 25 minutes, right? And I could actually set up prompts so I could do it very quickly for all kinds of companies. Which is why, I don't know about you, but I'm currently being inundated with all these companies trying to do marketing for me. And I'm pretty sure they're all driven by these sorts of things, right? People have got programs running and I've been identified on some list, and so I'm getting all sorts of offers.
But I think it's
so
still
easy to do
also
now.
depending very much on on the quality of the prompt that you are writing to it.
Yes.
Because
Absolutely.
when you listen to various podcasts and so on,
Yep.
they are trying to do the opposite. They're trying to write prompts that is making the AIs tweak or fail or come up with something funny.
Right.
So the better the prompt that you're writing,
Yes.
the better you will get at it. So,
Yes.
so of course, the marketing department will then become the prompt department.
Yes, though, I mean, so what they the word they're calling it using is prompt engineering,
Yeah, exactly.
right? And then some people have said, "I say, what do you do now? Do you tell your kids to go to college and study prompt engineering?" But of course, the problem is that's where we are right now with this technology, right? When we're 2 years in, and we're waiting on an imminent launch of version GPT-5, right? So, and other technologies as well. Who knows how long it's going to be important to be able to be really good at prompting, because guess what's learning how to take us not good prompts and make them ones we like the output of every time we put in a prompt. So there's this constantly evolving thing, right? So it's very interesting. But yes, exactly. Right now, you get most value out of this if you're very good at putting in good prompts. That's true. Yeah, interesting. Here's another example. This is actually from a professor from I think he's from MIT. His name is Kartik Hossinger, and I saw this written up in an interview that he described something he did at a real estate conference. So again, this is kind of real-time use of good prompting. So this is real estate industry. I like these couple of examples. I thought they were very impressive, and apparently the audience thought they were impressive too. So so you're a real estate agent, real estate company. There's obviously a lot of them. You have a video of a house on YouTube that's playing, right? They're all over the place, and it's got lots of comments on it. So what he did real time, kind of in front of a conference crowd, was to go to ChatGPT and give it what they call is, a structured prompt using prompt engineering. This is, in fact, again, I'm going to show you an example soon, but this is a chain of thought prompt. So it's sort of this sort of step-by-step process, and these are seen to be most effective in actually generating what you want. But telling ChatGPT you've got 6 steps, what it needs to do, go to YouTube, download the comments from the URL you give it to, take that, do a type of analysis, tell it what the analysis is, then sort these and give me a summary of the positive comments, sort the negative comments, give me a summary of those, then tell the marketing manager what you should do and give me a code to do all this. So basically, that's the prompt that was used. It then gave a code to the prompt engineer, which, working with Google Colab, it was run, and then you get the summary just emerged. And this is something that typically would have taken days to do, right? To go through 30,000 comments, summarize them, and so wow, right? That's just cut my my research time way down. So that's an example of something you could do. Very impressive. And then a second one, again, kind of interesting. I want to sell my house. Put my photographs in. Say I'm going to list this, and then basically write me the real estate listing to post on Zillow. That will make people read it and get excited to come and tour this house. That was the prompt. Did it real time in front of this set of real estate professionals. It came up and they were like, yeah, I'm not sure I would have done a better job. And that's again, one of the bread and butter activities of, a great estate agent is working out how do you promote these houses. So yeah, that's the kinds of things you can do. There are many, many use cases out there. I just wanted to highlight some I think are kind of really interesting things that we can do. All right. Now, what I wanted to do is share with you a little bit more detail from academia. And so this is a couple of studies that were done by folks. This one is done by folks at Stanford, not at Stanford, sorry, it's presented at Stanford, by folks from Wharton, MIT, and Harvard. And some folks from BCG as well, where they basically took BCG consultants, 8% of the workforce, and did an experiment on them using ChatGPT to see if it could make them better at their work, or to see if it was as good as them at their work. So they took 7% of the BCG global workforce, 758 people, and divided them into 2 experimental groups. They basically they have to do sort of volunteer time for professional development. So if you volunteered to be in this project, you got points towards your firm professional development time. So that's, people were happy to volunteer. They took a survey, so there was a bunch of controls on these people, including their past performance, whether they knew about AI, what their personality traits were, the big 5. So kind of lots of sort of data to make sure that we understand who these people are, so that when we analyze the data, we're not getting noise, right? We're really seeing, is ChatGPT making a difference when we give these people tasks? They ran 3 conditions on the experiment. In one of them, people had no ChatGPT access. They were not using ChatGPT. They were not told about ChatGPT. They just were given the task to do. The second version of the experiment, they were given GPT 4.0, the one that you can access for $20 a month. And that was the tool they had. And they were just told, this is the tool, I'd like you to use it. All they were told. In the third piece, they were given a very short training, less than an hour, with a bit of information on what ChatGPT was, a couple of ways you might want to think about using it, some best practices in prompting, and that was it. Not an extensive training, right? And part of the reason they describe as not doing extensive training is, there are no manuals for this stuff, right? The tool doesn't come with a manual. The people who make the tool don't have a manual for it. So, that's one argument. Now, there are, of course, I don't know if any of you have these, some companies now have digital academies, and one of the courses that you'll do there will be prompt engineering, right? So we'll help you use tools like this. But again, it's really evolving very, very quickly. So not so much important to have lots of training, but a little bit of training. Let's see if that helps. And so they're using Naked GPT, April 23rd version, using a protocol link. So it's a little bit, they're not doing proprietary activities on it, I don't think. They're doing sample tasks that aren't real client tasks. So they're not putting real client data into OpenAI. So that's the job. They were actually given 2 types of tasks, and I'm going to show you the results for one of them. And they were these tasks which Ethan Malik calls inside the frontier tasks. Now, what does that mean? So if you think about any new technology, it gives you certain capabilities. And at the edge of those capabilities is kind of the frontier of extra capabilities that you might do. So I just gave you a couple of examples which I think show that ChatGPT is quite good at, say, many of the functions a marketing department can do. One of the things ChatGPT, at least a couple of months ago, wasn't very good at was anything involving math and counting, right? Because predicting the next word doesn't involve math or counting, right? So that's kind of a thing. So if you said, write me a slogan that has 25 words in it, it could write you a really clever slogan, but it might have 27 words in it. And if you said, oh, I actually want 25 words, not 27, it still might come back with, oh, yes, sorry, I got that wrong. And it'll come back with 26 words or 28 words or 24 words. So it couldn't quite count, right? So that would be the frontier of the activity of the task. So for this experiment, they did a number of tasks that were inside the frontier. So things like the marketing report, the picture rendered, that would be inside the frontier in this case. In actual case, the examples we've got here, so I can read these out for you. List the initial segments you might consider for marketing. List the presumed needs of each segment. Explain your answer. Decide which segment is most important. Explain your answer. Come up with a marketing slogan for each segment you are targeting. Suggest 3 ways to test whether your marketing slogan works. Write a 500-word memo to your boss explaining your findings, etc. So those are the tasks that are kind of inside the frontier of what ChatGPT is actually quite good at. So that's what they were. And so these tasks are assigned, they're 30-minute assessment tasks, 90-minute time sequence of 18 tasks, these 2 different kind of versions. They're very much in line with the daily activities that you'd expect a BCG consultant to do. Right, and BCG consultants, who are these people? I think you definitely have. Do you have BCG in Copenhagen? Yes. You do, yes. So they're typically very smart people. I don't know if we have anyone from AVT who's gone to BCG or come from BCG. Do we? No. I mean, they're typically quite highly sought after jobs, right? So these the folks from top universities go here, right? So these are no slouches in terms of their academic credentials. Very knowledgeable, very capable people. They're international. They come from around the world, so they're not, and they're actually pulled geographically, so they're not all in the same place doing this assignment. And then so we get them to do these tasks, and then we assess the tasks and see did they do well or not well. The way that they're assessed in this experiment is they used BCG people to assess them. They used MBAs from Wharton to assess them and PhDs from Wharton. And they used some AI graders as well. So they used AI to say, is this a good version of the task or not? On that, and then this is Ethan Muller, because he really does focus on education. He's done extensive tests. And I've not done this yet, Jesper and Jesper, but AI apparently is very, very good at grading. It is about as good as professors at grading. It can actually have less bias than professors at grading, apparently. And what's interesting is they now have all these, so there are programs now obviously that are supposed to assess whether or not you've used AI to create your assignments. Those actually aren't particularly good. They can't really tell. In fact, they're biased against non-English speakers. But the grading itself is quite good. So, it's kind of, there goes my job too, right? I'm done. So, but that's what they used to grade this. So, and they found no difference between these different gradings. So this all made sense. Okay, what did they find? So the top line results were that this is on the bottom axis is quality. On the side axis is the volume of folks at different levels of quality. And so what we found is that the people that did not use AI had this quality level of around 4 as an average. The people that used AI on these in the frontier tasks have a much higher quality level, right? And there's the two different colors are the people that used had the training or not the training. So the training didn't make very much difference, but using AI made a difference in the quality. And then these are a little hard to read, but what they found was that if you used AI, you got 12.5% more work done. You were 26% faster, and it was 40% higher quality. And when they did this analysis, they then looked at this and they thought, well, this is kind of weird, right? Because this is huge, this difference. So they threw all of those variables in terms of like past experience, AI use, all sorts of variables into the model to see if they could explain away, this difference in quality, and they could not. So this is a very robust difference. So you look at this, and I don't know, what do you think? What do you think when you look at this? What does this say to you? Yeah. And should you be using it in your organization, right? So basically everyone in your, you need to work out how, we're going to talk about what's the catch, right? What are some of the issues maybe? But everyone in your team should be using this because they will be more productive if they use this, right? Now the question is, what do they use it for and how do they use it? But you are more productive if you use this. That is what this tells me, right? That's crazy. And this is a productivity that we don't normally get, right? And we think about it, we think about companies spend millions of dollars, trying to get a 2% increase or a 5% increase. And this is just sort of sitting there, and it's just about free to do this. Yeah.
I'm a bit worried about the process of learning. If you get the results that easy,
Yeah.
how do you then process, and then how do you, when you learn something, you tend to build on that learning.
Yeah.
So how do you establish that learning that is old-fashioned now?
I love it. So this is one of the
maybe I'm old-fashioned.
No, one of the social implications, right, of this kind of technology. So what do we think? I mean, we don't have an answer yet, but what do we think about this learning? Yeah.
You have to read what you deliver. So from that perspective, it's not just going into ChatGPT and say, I need this and this and this, like the 500 words, and then you get it out and then you hand it in.
Yeah.
So there will be some kind of learning from what you get because you will have to study your results before you deliver it. Like if it's a BCG consultant and they have to do a presentation, they will need to know the presentation. You cannot just hand it out.
Not just hand it in.
Yeah, but if you have to present it to a client, you will have to understand what lies behind it. So therefore, you also need to study it.
Yeah. Kirsten?
Yeah, I'm thinking about internet data because I'm working in the clinical. So there's a lot of that would be sort of hidden data. We don't want to share that with the rest of the world. But of course, we would like to utilize that you can get wiser and more knowledge.
Yes.
So how do you deal with that? Because I
Yes.
mean, if you're copy pasting that into ChatGPT, it's going to eat that up and
Yeah.
it's going to be used. So
Yeah. So let's come to that one. Okay. That's a very, very good point. So, yeah.
Just to build on that one, it opens up for an entirely new business, I think. Companies getting their own AI machines, right? That's
Yes.
a new line of business.
Yes.
Instead of just getting a SAP system or something else, it's
Yes.
a new line of business where people can buy their own ChatGPT's versions.
Yeah. So can you somehow do it in a
Yeah.
private way? But I think I think to me it's something about there is definitely some learning, right? So so these are pretty simple tasks. And what you, I guess, would hope would be people are getting better at a different level of task. So rather than the task of generating, they're getting better at the assessing task,
There
right?
are
So
already systems where you can actually have ChatGPT say, given what, look at my data,
yes,
and then look at the net.
yes. So
But
I mean,
don't mix it up so
Yes.
that you actually use OpenAI technology on your own set of data.
yes,
And I think that's when it becomes really powerful.
there are some solutions, but just on the learning. I was going to do the learning
Yeah.
piece first, okay? And then just sort of, but this is not actually a universal effect though. So they cut this another way, which I think is really interesting. And the impact of this was by far and away highest for the low performing members of the BCG team, right? So these are all BCG consultants. So, you know, as an ex-McKinsey person, I'm going to give BCG the benefit of the doubt. I think these are all pretty clever people, right? They're all pretty capable people. But they obviously have a spectrum of performance curve. And so the bottom half performance of people and the top half skilled participants, what they found was it was the bottom half skilled participants that had this massive boost in performance, and the top half was a much smaller boost. So what this technology is doing is it's kind of bringing your less performing team members up, so their basic level is starting to match, you know, the kind of the well, it's actually beating the unassisted, you know, higher versions of the team. So it's making everybody a top performer. And those top performers are kind of keeping their edge, maybe a tiny bit of an edge. They're not getting much benefit of it. So if you're really good already, you're going to look at the stuff and it's, you know, I mean, you might get a little bit faster, but the quality is not that much different. But if you're not yet experienced enough, right, you're basically getting that knowledge. Now, will you ever get the experience? I guess that's your question, right? I don't know, but you're going to get a different kind of experience, right, and a different kind of knowledge. So it's existential crisis time, right? It's like, what is this enough? Is this what we need? What I didn't include in my slides here is they also had some activities that were on the frontier. So things, you know, the example I gave was kind of a poor one, but do this paragraph in 25 words, things that ChatGPT can't do. In this case, it was they had some data in an Excel file and some facts, and the two didn't quite make sense. So if you looked at them properly and did some analysis, you would see that there was a flaw in this analysis, and that you would make a different recommendation than if you looked at it in a cursory way. And basically, the AI mainly got it wrong. They then had a separate task, which is to make a recommendation based on the analysis. And what was interesting was, so the AI mainly got the task wrong because it was this complex on-the-edge task. And so it's not good at some tasks. So you're going to need to work out what the tasks are, because if you have it doing a task, might get certain tasks wrong if they're on this edge. What's even scarier is on the recommendations, though, the wrong recommendations of AI were judged very high. So this dumb answer comes out in this great prose, right? Very well written, very well structured, and in fact, people are convinced by it. And so, you know, the phrase they use, I don't think you have this phrase in Danish, is you are falling asleep at the wheel. You know, the AI is going so well that you're no longer staying awake to understand what's going on. So you're missing the fact that it made a big error. You're not even seeing it. Some people still saw it, right? But not everybody saw it. So while yes, you get this fantastic boost in performance and we should be using it, if you're using it for the wrong task, you could make a big error and everyone could miss it. So again, it's a little scary, right? A little bit of an existential crisis here. Yes, Bjorn.
Just following up a little bit on Dane's comment. This is like giving the slow runner a bike. Of course, the one on the bike will be then faster than the fast runner.
Yes.
And I guess my worry with this is I always personally, I quite enjoyed brainstorming sessions.
Yes.
And already now I feel that I'm a little bit naked if I don't have my phone with ChatGPT on when I do brainstorming sessions. I can feel my brain is gradually getting slower
Yes.
by using this tool. And of course, the interesting thing is what happens if you get these bottom half start using ChatGPT and then take it away. Will they eventually become even worse performers without it?
Right. Will they not be able to do these basic functions?
Yeah.
So I think this is part of the question is, but would you take away their phone? Would you take away their laptop? Would
Right.
you? So if it does become part of how we do things,
Yeah.
then it's just part of how we do things, right? I mean, our kids can't handwrite anymore, right? They cannot handwrite. That's gone away. So yeah, it's kind of a interesting point. But yes, Rasmus.
Maybe we will also see an increase in the bigger mistakes because we become more lazy. That is building on what you say.
Yes.
We just rely on this is right,
Yes.
and we forget to
check,
analyze
to
and
look.
check it. So
Yes.
we will see more mistakes like the guy with the bicycle and the two things.
Yes.
So that would be something to be aware of in the future.
Yeah, no, there's definitely, risks involved. My personal experience using it is the more expert I am in what I'm asking it to do, the more obvious it is to me what's not quite right. Whereas I'm doing something where I'm not really an expert, then I find it's wonderful, right? It's extremely helpful. So it's that danger, right? Particularly is on that edge. So you gave me a wonderful segue in terms of brainstorming, Bjorn. The second study I want to show you is actually a study about innovating or trying to innovate in terms of generating ideas with ChatGPT. And this was done with students at Wharton. So what they did was they tried to basically brainstorm ideas for a product. It was a product that cost $50 for students in college. And the first approach was to get individual students to brainstorm. So they got, I think it's something like 400 students working in different groups. But they get students like generate 10 ideas each, then to get together in groups of 10, to brainstorm on those ideas, to rank ideas, and so on and so on and so on, to come up with a really great set of ideas. And then what they did is they took these lists of ideas from the students and they said, okay, let's use ChatGPT to also generate ideas and see what we come up with. And let's compare, in this case, they were comparing the diversity of the idea. So how broad a spectrum of ideas, because that's sort of like the input for the idea, not the selection piece, but the input piece. And so, one of the hypotheses was perhaps ChatGPT gives you a less diverse set of ideas, right? And students give you more diverse ideas. And so this is the extent of similarity. So this is the extent of diversity. So what they found was the group of students, which is, I'm going to get the purples wrong. I believe this is the group of students. The group of students here has actually the most diverse ideas. So the 0.243. And then they put in the AI. And the AI that was not, these are AI prompts, they're sort of summarized. The AI prompts that were not so sophisticated. This is a technique of seeding ideas, which they tried. They tried a typical brainstorming prompt, use brainstorming ideas, ChatGPT to come up with ideas. Then they said, do it like you're like a Stanford student or Stanford professor. Then they said, do it like you have all the knowledge of the Harvard Business Review as your basis of information. Then they said, do it, this is the base case, just a standard prompt. Another kind of prompt, do it like you're a creative entrepreneur. And then the most successful one was this chain of thought prompt. And with the chain of thought prompt, they got ideas that were better than most and about as good as the students and took, a fraction of the time, right? So again, if you had 400 MBA students you could use to generate ideas, that's the best, right? But you got to have the students, it's going to take a lot of time. Or you can have a really great prompt, and a couple of minutes, and ChatGPT will simulate that kind of set of ideas. So again, like diversity of ideas, it's pretty good, right? So innovation is doing something very interesting and very careful, ChatGPT is doing something very interesting about generating diverse ideas, supporting the innovation process. So that's something else it can do for us. And here I just put in the prompt. So how do you make ChatGPT do something like this? So the most successful strategy they had was this chain of thought prompt. And this was the base strategy. to generate 1,200 ideas in one session. So that was the base point where they came from. So this is their base prompt. So generate new product ideas with the following requirements: targeting college students, physical good, $50, information about the idea, number the idea, give them a name, separate them, 100 ideas, 100 separate paragraphs, should be expressed as a paragraph of 40 to 80 words. That's the base prompt. That's what generated something not as good as the students. To get it nearly as good as the students, they use this chain of thought prompt technique. So to show you what that is, actually, the first bit's very similar. So this is describing what's on here, but this is the piece that makes the AI sort of slow down and think about it in a process way that makes its predictive powers work better. So what does it do? You tell it to follow the steps. It's got a personality, right? You have to kind of play to its personality. You can't just say follow the steps and it's done. Do each step, even if you think you do not need to, right? Literally. And they've tested all these variations, right? So this was the best variation. First, generate the list of 100 of these short title only. Second, go through them, determine if they're different and bold, modify them. This is important. Next, give the ideas a name and combine it with a product description. The name and idea is separated by a colon, followed by a description. So do this step by step. So that chain of thought prompting created this difference in the diversity of ideas, this sizable difference. So the type of prompt you give makes a big difference at what you get out of these technologies. So that's, again, what can it do? It can do simple basic tasks and help people get better at doing simple basic tasks, and it can also help generate very diverse ideas. So, I think that's what it can do. Now, should we be scared? Should we be worried about our jobs? Should we worry about what our children do and what they study and how they prepare for the next kind of phase of work? I think, again, what's interesting is I'm seeing two lines of thought out there. One is the big scary headlines like the Goldman Sachs one that says, it's coming for your job and you should be worried. And then the other one, which is interesting, and this is one I'm hearing about from some academics, but also McKinsey likes this one a lot too, is all about augmentation. So what this is doing is it's not taking away your job, it's just taking away, the parts of your job that are mundane, that are zapping your productivity and giving you all this extra time to be productive. And that sounds amazing, right? That sounds like a really good idea. And imagine what you could do with this extra time. So if you're self-employed, you could choose to go on vacation, right? And what I think we've still got to grapple with as a society is we've been through cost cutting, haven't we, before, where we try and work out, what could we do more efficiently at work so we could take, 20% of our time away. So I guess ultimately we could not have 20% of the people doing this job. So that's the question. If we're augmenting, right, what are we going to do with that extra time? So if we can use that extra time to create even more value and do more valuable things, then that's great. If, however, the economy collapses and firms go on, cost-cutting splurges, then it's a kind of a different conversation. So I think that's something, again, to grapple with, right? Not just for our firms, but also just for our societies. How do we think about this? So that's what it can do. Now, number 3 is what's the catch? And some of these have come up in our conversation so far. So what is the catch with this technology? The first one is sort of fairness. And why is there a fairness issue? Because there are biases. We have biases in ourselves. We have biases in our language. We have biases in our histories. And that is what's powering these engines. So to the extent those biases are out there, they exist in all of the stuff that these models are using, these transformer models are using. So we need to make sure that we account for those biases and try and deal with them. What's interesting is that there's again studies on how this stuff works. This is not just transformer models, but also machine learning models using AI technologies. There's legislation, we know, particularly in Europe, but in other places to try and remove this bias. So, making you not discriminate by gender, for instance, in data. So I believe it's in Europe that you have to scrub the gender data when you use these models to do things, so you're not causing bias by gender. We just have to be really thoughtful about it. There was a recent study that looked at credit scoring, and the way credit scoring works, right, because it takes all this information about people to work out what their credit worthiness should be to decide whether to give them a loan or a credit limit and that kind of thing. One would argue that, you know, men and women shouldn't matter what your gender is, but the problem is that the women tend to stay out of the workforce for a period of time with child rearing and may not have quite the same credit history as a man. So if you take the gender variable out of the data, then they actually look less credit worthy. Whereas if you put it back in, given the same time out of the workforce, short of credit history, they're actually more reliable than a man with the same data. So you need to put the gender data back in order to not discriminate against the women unfairly. So there's all these interesting things about how we do this. And there are techniques, there are ways to do that. You have to be very thoughtful about it. With machine learning, you can use a number of different ways to kind of use proxy data to make sure that you don't discriminate unfairly. So that's good. The challenge with ChatGPT and this kind of technology is we don't have visibility into the model. So we can't really see how it's making these predictions. So it's harder to account for the bias. So we have to be more rigorous and think about how we do that, more creative and think about how we do that. I don't think we've solved it yet. But you know, what's interesting is the model makers are putting in parameters to try and solve them. So I will show you, I'll show you an example in a second where things seem to have gotten a little bit better, at least on one count, but there are definitely going to be biases. A second thing to worry about is hallucination. It does make things up, right? It's kind of supposed to, right? It's got actually a randomness parameter in it, which you can set. So you can set it to be less random and then it makes up a bit less stuff. You can also educate it a lot. So ChatGPT today hallucinates less than ChatGPT last month. It really makes up less stuff. You can educate it on specific data sets and put like tests in there on what it's saying. So that's if you're using your own data. So in the medical field, they have very successful applications for diagnosing people, and they have criteria so it's not hallucinating, right? So it's checking, and then it's as good as better than an average doctor at doing a diagnosis. But you have to augment, you know, use other APIs, etc., to kind of augment this technology. The technology itself is very good, but with these extra things, it becomes better and not so bad at hallucinating. But it definitely does hallucinate, and that is kind of strange. It also has weird behavior. Again, we don't really know what's going on. So as I said, it really does like you to be emotional in the prompting. You tend to be more successful the more emotional you are. Saying things like, you know, do follow the steps. You know, it's important. If it, again, I'll give you an example. One of the prompts that they found most successful at getting to do chain of thought prompting was take a deep breath and go step by step. Like it's an algorithm, right? It's a neural network, right? Like take a deep breath. Like, there's no lungs, you know, like what's going on? But that's, you know, so it's got these weird things going on. There is reliability, again, because of this randomness factor. You don't get the same result every time, right? You get some variation on what's there. There are now, again, as it evolves, they've got some math models in there now that do some basic math. So it used to be that it couldn't do certain math, and now it can do some kinds of math, but not all math. And you can see it when you run it. It runs a little check, and it's using some other program to check some of its math. But if it doesn't have that, or if you're in an area where it doesn't have this this check, again, you can get different answers at different times, which is a little worrying. So again, you need to work out how do we control for this, particularly some of these mission critical uses. Again, an explainability. Now, you can ask it to explain why it came up with something, and it will give you a great answer as to why it came up with something. But it didn't actually do it that way, right? It's all just predicting the next word, right? There is no logic process in there. It's just this predicting the next word in a sequence process. So you can't always explain what the answer is, and it can't tell you how to get there either. So that's kind of interesting. Actually, it was in our last class, I think it was the digital strategy class, so last March, that we had someone from one of your energy companies here who said they've been running AI for energy efficiency, and the first, few months of iteration, they were very much controlling everything it did. And then now it was just doing stuff and they didn't know why, but they were getting better every week. So they had lost control of exactly what it was doing to maximize efficiency. So that's been happening with machine learning. It's happening with this definitely. So these are things in particular to ChatGPT, large language models, transformer models. In addition, we have some things which would be true of any kind of machine learning. The data security, right? You do need to manage for that. OpenAI, if you're just using it on a public platform, it's not taking and storing the data you give it when you ask it a question, but it does go into the learning process. So there's room for some leakage, right? So you can set up some sort of gardens so that your data doesn't go out. You can definitely set up different algorithms that work with it to, say, put in your customer care instructions, your product manuals, your service manuals, your internal company protocols and procedures. So it can search and use those as a resource, but it doesn't put them back out there. Again, don't do that yourself with ChatGPT. Get some of the IT professionals involved in doing that. Whoops, lucky it was just America. Privacy is an issue. There's concern about individual data that's going in there. You're revealing data about yourself as you put in there. You might be using data about other people if you're doing analysis on them. How are we controlling for that? IP issues, copyright, deep fakes, is a misuse of that data. So we see more of that happening. Everyone's very worried about the next election cycle in the US. We're already getting robocalls from Biden talking about his terrible, activities that are very awful things that he's doing, but it's because it's not Biden, it's someone that sounds like Biden. There's the social, the environmental impact, some of these ethical issues. Penelope's raising some of them in terms of learning. What are the long-term implications of this? And this to me, what am I here for? What do I do? One of my colleagues at INSEAD, Professor Peter Zemsky, is about to take a sabbatical and go to the Kennedy Center at Harvard. And he really wants to think about how do we think about life moving forward if this is what happens. So if OpenAI, ChatGPT, technologies like this really make us 40% more productive, and we don't want to use that time to make even more money, right, or make even bigger businesses, but rather to have a more fulfilling life, and do different things. What does that mean for society? How can we change the way we think about things, how we pay people, how we reward people, how we incentivize people growing up in terms of what they do with their lives, right? Will it just look different? So those kinds of things, we don't know. Just some examples of these, which I think are kind of fun. So this is bias. So this was what you'd get if you put in show me examples of strong leadership. Okay. So clearly, yes, a bit of a bias there, but all those women, so many women up there, right? So I thought, okay, so it's funny, I took this from someone else's presentation and I was like, I need to do my own, so I'll do my own in ChatGPT. So I said, example of strong leadership, and it gave me, you can't see it. Should have been in front. Where is she? I need to put this on to find it. She is here. Okay. So there we go. That's what it gave me. So things have moved along a bit. That's the current example. If you say, give an example of leadership. So I think again, it's correcting itself, right? This model is learning and changing. So there's less bias, right, in terms of at least gender bias in this example of leadership than there was when this was pulled by someone in a presentation that was done less than a month ago. So it's learning about these things like biases, but they're there.
Isn't that what the Google experienced a couple of weeks ago when the Pope suddenly turned into a black person and showing an image from a Nazi soldier, which was an Asian woman? Stuff like that.
No, that's, so you have to be careful of this, right? If you're using this for a business reason. The hallucination piece, a classic example here is the launch, right? Google's launch of Bard. You probably know about this. So one of the examples that was given in the launch of Bard was the prompt was, your 9-year-old might like these discoveries. Oh, the prompt was, what new discoveries from the James Space Webb Telescope can I tell my 9-year-old? So this was the resulting prompt as to what you could tell a 9-year-old. Someone tweeted back, not to be a, well, actually jerk, I'm sure Bard will be impressive, but for the record, the James Webb Space Telescope did not take the very first image of the planet outside our solar system. It was done by this person in 2004, right? So a hallucination at the flagship launch of the brand new product of Google, Bard, right, their version of ChatGPT, it hallucinates in that presentation. So this is not bearing well, and in fact, the impact was $100 billion of value, right, coming off of Google's parent company's share price. So, you know, that's what it can do that can be bad. In terms of weird behavior, and so people will still tell you that Copilot or Bing is a little weird. It's got the quirkiest personality of all of the different ones that you might play with. So if you want to spend time with them, you'll find this. They found that extended use of the chat features can lead to repetitive answers and unprovoked responses. Many users reported this type of issues online. Microsoft explained why this was. So, you know, it can be aggressive, stuck in loops, generate odd responses. It's weird. It's a weird technology. Other examples of weird I came across, which I quite like, you know, to improve the prompt, use chain of thought prompting. Best one is to tell it to take a deep breath and go step by step. It's just weird. You can also give it a pep talk. No, you absolutely can do it. I believe in you. If it tells you it can't do something, just keep telling it. No, you can. I'm sure you can. Try harder, right? And it possibly can do it. You can also get emotional and supportive. No, it's really important and you are great at this and can do it. I know you can. Or be stern. So one was when prompting it to ask for some code on something and it kept not giving the code. The code finally came when the prompt was changed to, you didn't actually write any code, you know. Seriously, this is odd. Just do it. And it gave the code, right? So, so again, the thing I think with Bard, people got in really bad loops. So you've got to be careful because if you swear at it, you don't know quite what it's going to give you back, right? We don't know. This is what's weird. This is weird. And so with this, but this is like kind of a disgruntled employee, right? This is more like a person. Managing this is more like managing the person than it is like managing code, right? So that is what the nature of this technology is. So, but it is weird. It does weird things. And the deep fakes, there's the Pope in Balenciaga. That was a deep fake. This is Biden, robocalls that are happening. And then in terms of existential crisis, you know, we're not the only ones thinking this. This was the call in the spring of 23 when some of the big tech companies said, hold on, we need to stop this. Right? We're seeing things happening. We don't know what's going on. We need to put a hold on this. Of course, they said that, but then they kept marketing their products and have kept pushing on. So, you know, that's kind of where we are in terms of the crisis piece of this. Okay, so that's, you know, an overview of some of the catches with using this technology. But on the flip side, there's these huge productivity improvements. It's here, it's happening, it's continually changing. So the next question was, you know, how do we use this? As an individual, the first bit of advice is you should just try and use it. What we find is that if you spend about 10 hours on any one of these tools, you'll get quite good at it. It takes about 10 hours of use. And it literally teaches you, right? If you get frustrated, you have to keep trying those crazy prompts, right? Step by step. It'll get more and more productive and you'll find more and more things that'll be useful for it. I don't know what will be useful for you. You know, I don't know exactly what you're doing, how you get most value out of this. But if you try it, it'll make a big difference. So that's step number one, is just try it. How do we think about it? First point here, and this is very much coming from a strategy point of view. Someone who teaches about shocks to strategy. This is another shock to strategy, right? This is just a technology. So the focus shouldn't be on using their technology, but rather what it can do for you that adds value, right? So how is it helpful to you, to your business? So focus on the value, the solution, the problem, not the technology. Some say, you know, going back to disruptive technologies, some of the work that you may have done here with Rory McDonald, which says, you know, let's look at the jobs to be done that are being done now and see how could we do those jobs using this technology. A couple of the leaders in this space, Bill Gates and Sam Altman from OpenAI, say because of the nature of this task right now, for it to be most useful, you don't think so much in terms of jobs, but you think in terms of tasks. So you have to break down sort of more of a micro part of a job because it doesn't really do whole jobs yet. If you put all the things together, it might be able to do a job. It gets more dangerous because all those catches get amplified, right, the more you do, but you can do that. But if you break it down into tasks, you also can be more useful. So Bill Gates's version of this is, you know, you can automate things, which means you don't need people anymore, so take the people out of the picture. So there'll be some things where automation makes sense. You can accelerate, so just do things faster. Or you can augment, so, you know, you can actually be better at it. And yeah, it's, you know, and so examples of these, what would they be? So automate, you know, a classic example of automate would be, I think Jesper's recording this lecture, right? So he could basically put that into ChatGPT, get the lecture converted into text and get it to do a, you know, please do a 1-minute summary of what was covered, or please do a, you know, a 5-minute read summary of what was covered, create something to post on social media. Right? You could do that. That could be completely automated. You wouldn't have to do it, you know, that piece, right? And obviously also accelerating part of your task, right? Is that something you're doing at the moment or not? No, okay. But it's something you could do, right, with this technology, and it would save you a lot of, also save you a lot of time. Example here would be, yeah, this was one, it was given actually when you go into a meeting, you come to a meeting late. Wouldn't it be great if you could just press a little button on, and it would say, what, you know, give a quick summary, what had happened in the meeting so far, right, real time. So you missed 5 minutes, but you knew what was happening. And then, you know, augment. So how could we add to what we can do, add to our capabilities, make ourselves even better at what we do. Sam Altman's version is more think in terms of how we can do things that we can have a task we can make happen in 5 seconds, have a task that would have taken us 5 minutes, and have a task that would take us 5 hours. You know, could we get it to do these things and again take that time away from us? So just thinking, you know, what sort of things could I do differently? In terms of the actual nuts and bolts of how, what we suggest you use is structured prompting to do this. So it's a prompt that's much more deliberate and thought out than just typing in conversationally what you might do. Though you'll get quite far with conversation, right? And if you even get stuck in conversation, you can say, could you give me advice as to how to go forward? Like you can ask it to help you help yourself. But some guidelines on the structured conversation are give AI a role and a goal. So tell it what it is and what it's there to do for you. So it knows that, you know, it's a strategy expert and its goal is to judge the quality of your idea, for instance. Then provide it with step-by-step instructions using concise, simple language. You could give it an example of how you want it to reason or complete a task. So what are the exact steps that you're going to follow, and describing those steps in detail. And then telling it, asking it, pleading with it to think step by step, being very direct about that will make a difference. You can also identify the particular expertise you want the AI to use or demonstrate. So do this, you know, give an answer that you think that we talked about Elon Musk would have given. You know, how would Elon Musk judge this idea? And give the criteria based on things that Elon Musk would agree with. You can also provide constraints on how you want it to interact with users. So I think it's very interesting. I'll give you actually an example. So I had, I don't know, do you do a negotiations course here? Do you use the book Difficult Conversations for it? Okay. So Difficult Conversations is a book from the people that wrote Getting to Yes, Fisher and Ury, that famous book about negotiations. My sister-in-law happens to have written the next book, which is Difficult Conversations. And I was having dinner with her co-author the other night, and we were talking about this. And he wrote Difficult Conversations, which is a well-known negotiations book. He runs a negotiation course at Harvard. And he said, he went on it and he said, I want to write a negotiation simulation. for use in the classroom. I want it to use the learnings and knowledge out of the book, Difficult Conversations. Please review that book and create a simulation for me. It should be between a father and son, and this should be the topic. Boom, and it came out, and he was like, oh my God. Like, that's as good, that's definitely as good as any first draft he's ever done, right? And it was exactly in the style of his book, which he wrote, right, using the frameworks and tools. And so the more you give it in the prompt, it can take an awful lot in, absorb it, and use it and structure something and spit it out. And again, if you're expert, as he is, he can use that and do a brilliant next draft, right? If you're not expert, you might miss some things that aren't quite right, right? But it'll probably be better than what you would have done yourself. So there's this weird, that's part of the crisis piece, right? How do I deal with that? But that's just an example. So structured prompting is a very good way to go about doing this. And then just from business point of view, David Rogers is the person who wrote the Digital Transformation Handbook. Here's the steps from a business point of view about defining problems, customers, success, experimenting, and share what you learn. So frankly, not that different. For a corporate program, definitely you need things like governance, training support, reporting mechanisms, and some kind of a budget, right? That's clear. Or perhaps you could take a bolder approach from a corporate point of view. So this is actually from McKinsey, and this is showing what different financial institutions are doing right now. And what it says is that they're kind of making this on a more structured level. So how are you organizing to do your generative AI activities? Are you doing it in a highly decentralized way where business units are responsible for it? Or are you doing it in a highly centralized way where you have internal folks doing this well, business units involved, a generative AI team involved, so it's sort of all the resources are centralized, and how these vary is on the level of the strategy, execution, and data and tech. Are they all centralized in one corporate place, or are they spread out across the business units? What they're finding right now is that people are more productive when things are more centralized. So this is sort of more, if I look at what David Rogers said, this would be more decentralized. If you centralize things and make a big go of it, you're more likely to kind of have more productive success, but it's a bigger investment. So, that's kind of where things are. All right, I'm going to jump to this one. So I'm almost at time, right? 10 o'clock, wow, goes fast. So I'm going to leave you with this. So will it work? So my suggestion to you, had we not had so much discussion, we might have tried this in class. My suggestion to you is take this tool and see what you might be able to do with it. I'd like you to try and think about ideas with ChatGPT. This is a suggestion. Using a structured prompt, generate ideas to transform your business, what you do. I'm actually going to give you a prompt. We're going to send it out in an email that Jesper has, which is a structured prompt, which gives you a set of ideas. Now, you're going to use it and see if you think it's any good. You could also tweak the prompt to go deeper on that idea, so ask more questions about the idea you like best. You could also use the prompt to create an elevator pitch for the idea. So you could go share it with senior management. And again, we'll do that for you. And then you could pitch that prompt. So that's an idea. Maybe you want to take this home and do it with your teams, right, to see if there's anything that comes out of it. The prompt, so there's the prompt. So this is sort of a chain of thought, step-by-step prompt, with that as the goal. In it, I've given the tool the job of being an entrepreneur, Steve Jobs or Elon Musk. I've given it a certain industry it's working in. I've set some requirements of what this kind of generative AI project should do. And I've asked it to go step by step to refine it, make sure that it's bold, interesting, and this should come up with a set of 5 ideas. It did work when I ran it. It works differently on different tools. So it worked differently on Copilot than it did on ChatGPT. ChatGPT is better at step by step. It tends to still be the superior tool. But yeah, try it. See what you think, and tweak this. To make it more productive for you. That's what we can do with OpenAI. And I'll leave you with just these final thoughts. As with all of these tools, it is not about the technology. It's about the value you can create with it and what you can do with it. Just always think about that. What's that value? How does it help me as a person? How does it help my company? How does it give us competitive advantage? we've been talking about predictive AI. We've been talking about ChatGPT. It is generating 95%. I'm sorry. We've been talking about generative AI. Predictive AI or machine learning is generating 95% of the value in AI right now. So that machine learning stuff is what's making value happen inside companies today. The hype is around what we just spent 90 minutes on, this generative AI, right? It's there and there's something special there. So it's worth talking about, but don't forget about the machine learning piece. That's the one you can control. You can get the security on the data, you can make it work well. Put the two together, it's very powerful. That said, Gen AI is here, it's approachable, go play, go augment, and go innovate. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for coming out, you know, being dedicated, looking at clouds. We studied a long time ago and an MBA. So we're still in the game for learning. So thanks for contributing to your own lifelong learning coming out. Thanks to the ones online. Thanks, Susan, for being a resource to all of us with all this new material. I feel we're getting to really understanding the frontiers of AI. I really enjoy that being nice to ChatGPT. I've never thought about that. I think Jesper is very nice to it. It does get better answers once in a while. So very much appreciated. But thanks again for coming out. We're doing a lot of activities. You know, you're always naturally welcome to come back to some of the programs and some of your colleagues, but we're also collaborating even more intensively around book launches from Harvard Business Review Press. So pay attention to them as well. But thanks again. Thanks to you, Susan. Yeah, another round of applause.
Thank you. So back to work. Oh, difficult conversations? Yeah.